All right, let's bring in some better legal minds. Eric Bland, Mark Garrigus, and Sara Azari. Let's start with the trip for the jurors. Sara, what I want you to kind of reconstruct for us, because everybody's going to have to refocus now, okay? Because we're hearing the closings, and then it's going to go into jury deliberation. So what are the concerns about the timeline, and how might that match up with what jurors would be looking for at the scene?
Well, I think, Chris, one of the most critical reasons for this jury view and why the defense requested it is really for the jury to not just rely on these two-dimensional, accounts by different witnesses during this trial, but to actually feel and see the spatial relationships, the distance, the timing, the doorway of the feed room where Paul's body was discovered is very important to the two-shooter theory. The distance between the kennel and the house is very important to that Mr. Clean idea that, he rushed over to the house, cleaned himself up, and then got in his car and went to his mom's. It was very critical to do this, and that's why the defense asked for this, because now when they're deliberating, Chris, they're going to have this template, right, to plug into the evidence into. They have actually been there. They have experience. Some of the questions have been answered for them, and it's very different than having to rely just on the experts who've testified. Now they get to do the analysis for themselves.
Sara, your experience is extensive when it comes to trials and juries. If there is a brawl in the back room, if there's a real hot dispute or several disputes going on, what does that portend in terms of outcome?
Well, I think the jurors, the jury deliberations is a dynamic between these 12 people. And I think it tells me that they're disagreeing maybe, they're struggling with some facts, they have questions. It could be a litany of things. But Chris, just to Eric and Mark's point about the credibility, I think the biggest lie in question here is the kennel lie. And I think the defense is going to put that into context. The context that while he was repeatedly lying to agents, he was also pressing them for what he believed was exculpatory evidence, the GPS data, the cell data. He believed that would, be exculpatory to him. So that's going to have to be put into context. And also, credibility is not just limited to the defendant's testimony. It goes both ways always, right? So Captain Phone Tosser, the experts that testified, Agent Owens, who used, in his own words, trickery on the grand jury. I mean, these are all credibility issues for this jury. And the idea that Murdaugh was giving testimony that was different from other witnesses, that's just called impeachment. I mean, he didn't flat out call these people liars. There's different reasons why people could see the same facts and recount them in different ways. It's not necessarily because they're lying. They might have a bad memory. There might be a slew of reasons. So he wasn't calling these people liars. He was just giving different testimony than their testimony.
Right. I mean, Mark, my point is, in my experience, if you have a jury that's really hashing things out, you're in good shape as a defense counsel because, really it just takes one to say, sorry, can't do it. I sat on a jury where it made no sense for this one holdout who happened to have been this big-time professor of physics or something. But, there was one guy who was just like, yep, don't trust the police. And people kept making waves of arguments to this guy. Has nothing to do with that. It happens to do with what this guy said. And he was like, nope, can't do it. And we hung. So, he could have...
But Chris, the bigger question is, how did you make it on a jury?
How did I make it on a jury? Because I'm a first-class citizen.
Yeah, you're a
lawyer.
I'm a first-class citizen, okay?
Who would put you on a jury, Chris?
Anybody who's smart puts me on a jury.
I've never made it on a jury.
Not like you people. I don't have dogs in the fight. I sit in there, just want to hear the facts, ask a couple questions. I'll tell you what happened.
It's interesting. Whether they deliberate on the weekend, I think, will be interesting. They're apparently not going to be sequestered. I don't understand that.
Me neither.
I suppose. I mean, it makes very little sense to me. I've had cases where they have been sequestered. I've had cases where they weren't sequestered and then sequestered for deliberations. And it sure strikes me that unless you're going to have them deliberate on the weekend, and that's a distinct possibility, and by reputation at least, this judge apparently holds jurors to trying to make a decision. Yeah. I mean,
well, that's why you wouldn't
my
sequester
guess is. Yeah, which
know?
is,
I mean, but the challenge
which
for the
is
defense,
interesting.
Mark,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was
Whenever
gonna
you
say
use the word interesting, I want to
fact-
hear the rest of the thought.
Well, the fact that he's going to let them deliberate and basically force them to deliberate without sequestration, I think in a lot of ways that tilts towards that's the benefit of the prosecution. That's not something the defense would want.
So the prosecution case for you guys at home was basically like, on the character side, the guy's a bum, okay? And he's so much of a bum that he was so desperate that he would do something that no parent can even imagine, because they have a high hurdle here. Who blows off their own son's head? We hear about spouses killing each other all the time. But what happened with the son is tougher. But it comes down to two scenarios, and we'll have to see what the defense does with their version of the scenario, which is, does it make sense that this man was motivated and able to execute what it looks like happened where you visited today? That's what the prosecution had to get over with the jury. Make them understand that you were there today. You know one guy could have done this, and you know if somebody was going to do it, it would have been this guy. Can the defense take its version, which is, wow, it would have been really hard for him to do this, and there's a lot of it that doesn't make sense forensically and ballistically, and you'd think you'd have a pretty open and shut case if somebody did something as crazy as this. We'll see if they can make that case tomorrow, and then we will come back together, and the better minds will process. But that's why they put me on the jury, ladies and gentlemen. I give it to you straight, I give it to you easy. Not like these three. Eric Bland, Sara Azari, Mark Garagos, thank you very much. We'll rejoin again tomorrow. Appreciate you. All right, when we come back...